You're listening to My Evolved Life, a podcast that simplifies health and fitness and helps you maximize your life. My name is Vuna Nguyen, and I'm the creator of the Evolution Training System. We're so lucky to be living in the information age, meaning it's easier than ever to access information and find answers to any questions you may have. But isn't it confusing when you read information that's conflicting, or worse yet, just sounds wrong? I'll be sitting down with industry professionals to give you clarity and leave you with tangible actions you can take immediately to improve your physical, mental, and psychological health. On today's episode, I had a great conversation with Marin McCue about mental health. We took a deep dive into topics like how to take control of mental health and reframe the course of your life. We talked about how to integrate meditation and mindfulness into your life, and we also talked about the physiological side of mental health. I learned a lot, and you will too. Let's jump into the show. Welcome to My Evolved Life. Today's guest is Marin McCue. So Marin is a yoga teacher. She is a spin motivator, a boot camp instructor. On top of that, she is a published author. She's a keynote speaker, and she's just a huge advocate for taking control of your mental health. Marin, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. What a great intro.
Thank you very much. Well, you gave, this is who you are.
Yeah.
I couldn't make that up. So let's start here. Before we dive into any topics, above and beyond your instructing, your consulting, how do you find time to do public speaking and writing? You're busy, period.
Yeah, I do a lot. Well, one of the first things I often say is, I don't have kids. So I have nothing but time and freedom. And I'm very efficient. It's something that I've practiced and learned, of course. And the healthier and stronger and more nourished I am, just the more I get done in a day. So I feel like I could be doing more, but it's really about balance for me. Yeah.
Okay, so no spoilers, but how much would you say mental health has a role to play in that?
Oh, it's everything. Yeah.
Perfect, and we'll dive into that more, I promise.
Yeah.
So I've kind of suggested the topic that I really want to dive into today is mental health.
Yeah.
So historically speaking, it's been a very taboo kind of subject. We were always afraid to talk about it, but now more and more, I hear it all the time, whether it's publicly outside or publicly on social media.
Right.
People are talking about that.
Yeah.
So, but before we dive into that, what does mental health mean to you? It's a big question.
It is. Yeah. Well, first of all, a way of looking at it is it's similar to physical health. We can have really poor physical health. We can have really strong physical health, and it goes the same for mental health. One of the things that I like to keep in mind as well is that mental health is different than mental illness. While there's correlation and crossover, it's still separate. So I saw this a while ago of, if you think of like a plus sign or quadrants, mental health being, let's say it's on the middle, and then mental illness being the vertical line. So you could have really poor mental health and no mental illness. You could have really poor mental health and really terrible mental illness. And on the other end, you can have really strong mental health and no mental illness, or strong mental health and have a mental illness. So of course it's connected, but it's different. So the mental health is really, to me, when it comes down to it, it's about your ability to regulate yourself, to feel like you have a sense of control in a world where there's lots of uncertainty and lack of control in a lot of different things. But if you are self-aware and nourished and balanced and are able to notice when, your energy dips low, or, your posture shifts, or your breath changes, or your heart rate increases or decreases, to really be aware of these different things, and then to recognize, okay, and now I can do something about it to bring myself back into a state of balance or presence. So that would be someone with really strong mental health. Strong mental health doesn't mean you're not going to struggle.
Of course. Right?
Or be triggered. I'm triggered all the time, but because my mental health is so strong now, I love being triggered. I can't say that all the time. There are times and still it's like really more of a struggle than others. But in general, like I really enjoy when emotions come to the surface or when I'm triggered, because it means, great, now I can actually move through this and release potentially a cycle that I've been in for a long time, so that I can have more space and presence and mindfulness throughout my day.
So I really want to touch on that because, you are somebody who is very, very in tune with themselves. And I'm sure that took a lot of practice, right? So you use words like trigger points and being aware. So what are, and we're jumping ahead right now, but what are the practices that an average person can do to become more aware, to know when those trigger points are coming?
Yeah. So one of the first things that I recommend for people is learning the practice of meditation. Now, meditation itself is quite an advanced practice. You can practice meditation, and then there's also a meditative state. So practicing meditation is not the same thing as meditating. So first it starts with mindfulness. So by doing this practice every single morning, and I'll get into some of the details of what that can look like, but basically you're creating a new baseline. If you can find that sense of calm and connectedness and openness and pleasure and joy, contentment, gratitude, these really high quality emotions, if you can tap into those in the morning, then you're more likely to notice throughout the day when something takes you off. So that's how it starts to become a little easier. For me, in my history, when I was really, really unwell, I had so many different voices going off in my head, and I didn't really have a baseline in general. Like, my baseline was like really, really low, if it was anything. So it was about trying to find a sense of balance first and kind of relearn which voice to listen to and what to feed and what to neither feed or fight. When to avoid what's going on and when to actually really dive in and be with it. And that was the process for me to kind of find what intuition actually is and who I truly am. One of the things that drove me nuts before was when someone would say, my dad often would send me these little exams of some kind to figure out, like, what's your dream job, or what kind of environment best suits you, or, what are your characteristics and qualities, or anything like that had to do with really getting to know yourself. I would go through these exams or these tests, and I would just become so frustrated because every single question for me, it was, well, sometimes that, like, this is who I really want to be, but this is actually how I show up. Like, I could say yes to any of the options they gave me. And so I never walked away from those feeling more clear with who I am, because I really had no clue whatsoever, and I could convince myself of anything in any one direction. So depending on the state of the mental health afflictions you're struggling with, practice needs to look different for each person. So you need to find a practice that meets you where you're at.
Right.
So for me, when I first started meditating, I had ADHD growing up, and so I was one of those, the classic response when people would say you should meditate was, it doesn't work for me, and actually makes me feel worse. And there's a lot of truth in that, but that was because I had this idea of what I thought meditation is or what it should look like, and that's not necessarily the case. So I knew that with all the different studying I'd been doing about trying to understand my mind and body and what I could be doing on a daily basis to practice strengthening what I wanted more of in my life, I learned that the conscious and the subconscious mind work very differently, and we want them to work together. And the subconscious mind wants instant gratification, and it's really helpful to create little benchmarks for yourself that will make what you're practicing more tangible and practical. So if someone really struggles with ADHD or any kind of mental health affliction, and you tell them, just meditate for 20 minutes, that's a big fuck you to anybody who would say that to me. Try to be in my head and sit still for 20 minutes. That's infuriating. So I decided, I asked myself, what would I do every single day? What's realistic for me? And I landed on 30 seconds.
See, I love that. And I do want to go a little bit deeper into that, really elaborate on that, because meditation is one of those things, and I've been fortunate enough to get into a very constant practice myself. However, for the average person, when they hear meditation, it is so overwhelming, right? There's no way I can sit still for that long. There's no way I can keep my mind quiet. Not understanding that, a loud mind is not necessarily a bad thing. You might have to work around it, but it's a practice, right?
Yes. Yeah.
So for somebody that wants to get into the act or the practice of meditation, what is a practical first step? It sounds like 30 seconds would suffice.
Yeah. So one of the things to understand is the difference between mindfulness and meditation. So mindfulness is an effortful practice, and that's really what we're doing in the beginning when we sit down to meditate. We're actually just practicing mindfulness. And mindfulness is one pointed focus on something. So you could be mindfully walking and just paying attention to your feet, right? Or you could be engaging your senses and mindfully, one at a time, what can I hear? What can I smell? What can I taste? You can be mindful with your food, which I suggest everyone does. Another tangent I can go on is this issue that so many of us have with the way food is absorbed or digested, or not being absorbed or digested. And part of it is because this chronic stress response that so many of us are living in. And if you sit down to eat and you're not actually really present with your food and smell your food and feel your breath and calm your system down, you're not producing the stomach acid you need to digest, and your body is still looking for danger. And so absorbing and digesting food is not a priority. Right. So understanding this chronic stress, like this is why meditation is so vital for us right now, because we're overloaded with stimulation. And to even just take 30 seconds to be mindful of your breath. Right away, your body is getting the signal, okay, I'm clearly not in danger, because I wouldn't close my eyes and pay attention to my breath. That's not something I would do if I were in danger. Right. So that's the other thing that I often will share with people is when you feel the stress response, ask yourself, well, what would I not do if I were actually in danger? You know, I wouldn't move gracefully with my breath. I wouldn't do a forward fold. I wouldn't engage in a conversation, right, or laugh, or ask a high quality question. And these are ways that we can slowly hack our system to show it that actually we're a lot safer than our body might be experiencing for whatever reason, which is, you know, we can go into depth into that as well. So the 30 seconds in the morning to close your eyes and just focus on your breath is all you need to do to start. I did that for 3 months consistently. I'd stopped and started meditation so many times, and it kept stopping because I would get into this bigger, better game. Even if I started at 30 seconds, it'd be like, okay, right, next week it's 5 minutes. Yeah. And then the next week it's 10 minutes. And then it would get to this point because of my competitive nature that I hadn't learned to harness yet, would always take me into more. And then meditation became a chore and something I didn't want to do anymore. So I had to really soften around it and say, okay, if it's just 30 seconds, that's perfect. I'm still spending 30 seconds of showing my body I'm not in danger. And then throughout the day, I found myself just kind of craving that. If I felt that little ping of stress or worry or fear, it would just immediately, I would close my eyes and just connect with my breath. 3 to 6 breaths, and then suddenly I'd be like, okay, here I am, I'm fine again. Yeah. And it was from doing that consistently that now I can sit down in the morning and meditate for 20, 30 minutes, no problem.
See, that is such a powerful message, because now this is my own opinion. I think one of our illnesses or weaknesses as people, as humans, is that we like to go all in right from the start, right? Unless I do 20 minutes, I'm not going to do anything at all. Yeah. And it's that mindset that sets us up for failure right from the get-go, right? The all or nothing, right? So you touched a lot on mindfulness.
Yes.
And mindfulness is one of those things, I think it tends to be perceived as almost elusive. You can't get mindful because of this little screen you have in your hands. Do you think that has anything to do with our lack of mindfulness, whether we're just sitting on our couch trying to take note of our breath, or outside when you're in nature?
Yeah, it's definitely contributing to the issue. I don't think it's the problem, but it's definitely taking us away from the solution. The subconscious wanting instant gratification, our phone is a constant instant gratification, right? You feel a little bit uncomfortable, a little bit bored, whatever it is going on, you know that you can pick up your phone and get these bursts of happy chemicals immediately because everything's at your fingertips. The problem is that when we spend too much time on our phone, we start disconnecting from reality, and we start seeing people's lives played out through these images or videos, right. and when we're not really, really balanced and in tune with ourselves, it's really easy to create stories about what other people have that we don't have. It's one of the survival instincts that can really go awry. There's nothing wrong with judging and comparing and knowing where you are in terms of status with the people around you. There's 100%. Absolutely nothing wrong with it. But if you get fixated on it and you think that's everything, or you make it mean something more than it actually is, or you feed it intentionally, it becomes an issue. And that's what a lot of people talk about, the ego, which is another tangent I can go on, because the ego is really just a survival instinct. Right. And if we don't understand it, we can demonize it, or we can glorify it. Or for me, it was even just spending too much time thinking about it, of like, what is it really, and where is it, and what makes it come to the surface, and what can I do to calm it down, and even just spending a lot of time almost personifying it turned it into something bigger than it needed to be. But one of my favorite analogies from Michael Singer's book, The Untethered Soul, is he talks about the blind man walking down a sidewalk, and he has his stick, and he has to swing it from side to side to hit the extremes to know where the middle is. And that's been something that I come back to consistently, because I don't want to shame or judge myself when I'm occasionally extreme.
Right.
Or when I go off, on a tangent or down a path that I'm like, whoops, that was a little too far. Like, it's taken me away from what I really want. But I also acknowledge and recognize that that's really important, because now I know I'm a little more clear on where the middle is. And that's how I've been able to find balance in my life, is seeing purpose in hitting the extremes, and just not getting stuck there or shaming myself for being extreme.
Right. We do tend to be very critical of ourselves, right?
Yeah.
When we hit those tangents.
Yeah.
Now, going back to what you said earlier about seeing the lives of other people on your phone, so social media, what have you, I kind of alluded to earlier that historically speaking, mental health has been very a taboo subject, but nowadays people are very, very open about their discretions, their pasts, and just very, very transparent about mental health. What do you think led to that? I know that's a big question, but what is your perception of that? Why are we so open today as opposed to 10 years ago?
It's a good question. I can only really speak from my own experience.
Yeah, please.
Yeah, so I had a lot of shame around my mental health struggles growing up, and I didn't have people in my life leading by example and sharing openly about what they're struggling with and seeing it from a very powerful place. My experience with it was that the people that are struggling are all, like, it's very obvious that they're struggling. And the people that are, in their suits and, doing all the things they love to do, there's a lot of joy, and it doesn't look like they're struggling whatsoever. So it created this very dualistic line of mental health means weakness and sadness and lack, and everything else is the good stuff. And through my own experience of really, really struggling, well, from the outside looking in, it looked like I was doing really well. I was an elite athlete. I had gotten a full ride scholarship to play basketball at San Diego State. I'm sure a lot of other people thought I was attractive or got attention, but that's not how I felt, and that's not the way I saw things. And so things just got worse and worse and worse for me, because I wanted people to think and see me in a certain way, and that wasn't what was real for me. I would come home and binge for a couple hours and then just feel disgusting and destroyed and ashamed, and then the next day go to the gym and work out for 6 hours and not eat anything until the evening, and then do it again. And then depression and self-harm really brought in a lot of shame and darkness into my life as well, and then instant gratification, seeking anything that made me feel good right now to avoid this darkness that I felt like was starting to just take over. And it was through several breakdowns, and then finally opening up to some very choice people in my life that I felt safe with. And when I started opening up about what I was going through, I felt a healing connection, because these people that I was able to talk to would either say, me too, or I used to go through something like that, or someone really close to me is going through something like that. And I started to recognize through these intimate conversations, this is not a Marin problem, this is a human problem. And it took me out of the focal point of what I was going through. And I recognized that if this is something that I can overcome, it also can become a superpower, because this is something so many people are struggling with. And I really would love to be able to help other people navigate this in maybe a more efficient and healthy way than I went through it. And so after saying that, seeing people that are, even elite athletes coming up and talking about their mental health struggles, is we're seeing more and more of these people that traditionally we thought like, oh, they have it all. And then we get to see this other side of them. And I think people are now recognizing this is something that is affecting everyone. And it doesn't matter how beautiful your life is, it's about what's going on inside. And that's the harder stuff to see. But people are just starting to open up more and more about it.
I see. No, that makes a lot of sense. It makes a lot of sense. And we are, for better or worse, we are followers. So if we start to see other people doing it, it gives us permission, so to speak, to do the same.
Yeah.
Now, one of the very cool things about your story is you took a past of darkness, if you will, and you really, really ended up manifesting that into a career helping others recover from the same. Now, I know you went to, you got a bachelor's in psychology and philosophy.
Philosophy.
Is that right?
Yeah.
And yeah, you really took that knowledge, that experience into a world where you're just helping others. Now, one of the very cool things about your personal philosophy and your passion is that you believe in helping others heal themselves and optimizing mental health.
Yeah.
Now, that is a very fascinating thing, the latter. I do want to touch on that. What does optimizing mental health mean?
Yeah.
It's a big one.
It is, yeah. Well, the way that I really am, the way that I'm starting to perceive mental health and even our abilities as humans is that it's infinite. I was playing with this morning with a client, actually, I like to work with the chakra system a lot, just to understand the mind-body connection and how energy works and really high-quality things to focus on in practice, because 95% of what you think today, you also thought yesterday. Right. And a lot of us are thinking really, really toxic and negative things. So the more you can bring in positive, interesting, high-quality thoughts, the better you're going to feel. When it comes to the lower three chakras, it's about your primal instincts and your survival instincts, and they're really important to align and be balanced in, so that you can actually get access to some of the more I don't want to say more human qualities, but more of the higher consciousness states that we have access to as humans. So the lower three are really like animalistic, and they're so important. They're beautiful. They're primal. It's about safety. It's about pleasure, connection, belonging, purpose, power, confidence, like really important qualities. And once you have those really, really in check, the heart is the center point for the chakra system. There's 7 main chakras, and the heart is the center. And the heart's frequency can reach further than any of the other bodily frequencies, including the brain. So really, it's the heart that becomes the amplifier and the lens to create balance in the body. If you live from your heart, you don't need to worry about ego. Or about any of these common afflictions of, well, I don't want people to think I'm too prideful, or like, what if, there's too much pleasure or too much joy, like these things that we worry about being too much or not enough. It stops being an issue when you're heart-centered. And of course, it takes practice to really understand that, but that's the goal, is to be leading from your heart. So it's kind of like a triangle at the bottom, right? So the root chakra is the bottom of the triangle, the base, and that's really about the foundation of creating safety, calming your nervous system down, making sure you have all your basic needs and nourishment. So your sleep, your movement, your nutrition, your mindset, all of these things create the strong foundation for the rest of the system. So as we move up to the point of the triangle, that's where we reach the heart. And then it's the inverted triangle. So the inverted triangle goes throat, third eye, crown. And the difference between this triangle, other than it being inverted, is that the top of it is infinite. Okay. So that's really about optimizing your mental health, is recognizing that the possibilities are beyond what you might even think is possible right now. And I'll again speak for myself, is that the growth trajectory that I've tapped into, now that I really take care of these basic needs, I do the work, I'm connected to my body, I move through things, I'm open, all these things I know that are really important, I'm experiencing like exponential growth on a daily basis now. And it really feels like there's no ceiling. It just keeps expanding. I keep feeling more and being able to do more and be more, and conscious stillness is easier for me, and then mindful movement feels more nourishing, and the more that I feel balanced and aligned in this system, it just becomes this exponential growth trajectory. And so that's what I want people to really, really learn, is that when you have a simple step-by-step process or a roadmap, it never ends. It's not about the end point. This is about enjoying your life.
Absolutely.
And really living from your heart, and to feel like you're yourself.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So even though we're in a day and age when we are, in general, more open about mental health, we are also in a day and age where depression it runs supreme.
Yeah.
Right? People are more depressed than ever.
Totally.
How do you take somebody who is just in the absolute dumps? They are at their absolute limit and bring them to that optimized state. Now, I know that's going to be a very progressive thing,
Totally.
but short of being able to find Marin and other people like Marin, what are the things that they can do, whether it's meditation or otherwise, that can slowly get them out of that?
Yeah. So learn about the vagus nerve. That So this one of the things that I really love doing is taking a lot of the woo-woo from yoga or philosophy or anything and really actually bringing it back to physiology. So we hear so often of, talking about the breath, like just breathe and, be in your body, and your body's so wise, and these things that, it feels good and I like that, but like, what the fuck does that actually mean, and how do I practice that? So learning about the vagus nerve has changed the way that I actually perceive my breath. And so the vagus nerve is the longest nerve in your body, and it starts at the base of your skull, and it has two main branches and then many, many peripheral branches that reach out throughout the major organs that it goes through. So from the back of the skull, it first reaches up with peripheral branches to the ears and to the occipital lobe, so it affects your eyes and your ability to hear. It then moves down the two main branches through the outside of your throat, and then through your heart and lungs, diaphragm, through your stomach, through the small intestines, and it lands in your colon. So the vagus nerve is one of the main components of the parasympathetic nervous system. So throughout our day, as we're having these little triggers or stress responses, or maybe all day in chronic stress, the vagus nerve is getting signals as to whether you're safe or you're not, and then it sends those signals throughout the rest of the body. So the simple act of taking a deep belly breath, that's sending a signal, right? The vagus nerve picks up on that, and it recognizes you're safe, and then it sends that signal to all the major organs. One breath, right? That's all it takes. So if you know that you're in a stress response, call bullshit on your thoughts, because you're only going to be able to think and do what you've done before. And for those of us who have really struggled with mental health or are in the grips of it right now, you need to call bullshit on your thoughts all the time.
Okay.
And really just be with your breath and come back into the moment as much as possible. And don't try to problem solve or even connect with people in a coherent manner until you've really brought yourself into that calm state. The polyvagal theory is something that I really love to use in terms of this as well, because they talk about the vagus nerve being like a stoplight. So we want to be in green, which is good to go, right? So you can feel that in your body when you just feel open and connected, and you're able to converse with people and maybe even disagree, but it's like, great, we agree to disagree, and you want to be social. There's social engagement involved. And then you move up to yellow, and yellow is like, continue with caution, right? So you might notice like your body gets a little tenser, or you might start pulling away from people, or feeling a little more reactive, a little more angry, or a sense of lack, or your thoughts start going into more negative directions. So as soon as you feel yellow, use your breath, use your exhale to calm yourself down and come back to green. Now, when we go up to red, this is the dorsal dive, the shutdown response. And this is something that I struggled with for 20 plus years without knowing what it was. When you are in a chronic stress state, your body can't handle that. It's toxic, it's dangerous. So if you're in that state, in that bright yellow for long enough, your body gets the signal that I must be being attacked right now. Like I'm clearly in a lot of danger.
Right.
And so what happens is the body shuts down. And often we call it depression. And it can be, and it often goes along with depression. But that feeling of lethargy, where you shut down, and you might even say things like, "Oh, I don't even care," or "I don't want to do anything. I'm lazy." That's actually your body shutting down as a survival mechanism. So when you feel the shutdown, you need to utilize your inhale, because the inhale is connected to the sympathetic nervous system. Your heart rate actually speeds up a little bit. So when in shutdown, focus on your inhale, make it longer than the exhale.
Okay.
And when you're feeling more of that flighty, anxious feeling up here, then the exhale is connected to the parasympathetic nervous system. So you utilize the exhale, draw it out as longer than the inhale, and that brings you back down. So all day long, I'm assessing, I'm noticing, like, oh, I'm feeling a little yellow right now. Okay, what can I do to bring myself back down? Because I spent so many years feeling a victim to the dorsal dive, to that hypoarousal, that shutdown, and I don't want to go there anymore.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Wow. One of the things that I try to be very mindful of with everything that we're doing, whether it's physical fitness or mindfulness with health, now call me a softie, but I like to think about the future generation and how we're potentially, what we're doing today really does impact them, right? So with this new world where we are talking about mental health, I personally believe that sometimes we can take it too far, where we can embellish the fact that, hey, you know what? It's okay to be super depressed, but some people overshare, and I think it creates a little bit of darkness. And this might be me just taking it a bit too far. But when you have kids growing up, kids are very prone to influence, right?
Yeah.
So when they hear all of this negativity spawned by poor mental health or what have you, they may be led down that path. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. Well, yes, kids are sponges. That's how we learn, is we're absorbing our environment, what we hear, what we don't hear, how we're treated, how people treat themselves, treat each other. That's all information that we take in to figure out how to navigate the world. I think no matter what, we're going to have trauma in our life.
Right.
There's big T trauma and there's little T trauma, and we all have little T trauma. One of the things that I often say is I would not choose anyone else's trauma over mine,
Right.
because we all have it, and I know my trauma, and so I'm happy working through my trauma. We can't protect people from having trauma, and it's not necessarily a bad thing.
Right. That's fair.
Right. So it's really more about having environments or relationships where you can talk openly about how you're feeling and what you're noticing, what you're confused by, what you're curious about. So to me, it seems like the more we can talk openly about mental health with the next generation, it's actually giving them some tools potentially to utilize what will be very real for them. If not now, it will be later on. And if not for them, then maybe their partner or for their kids. But you can't escape it.
Right.
On the topic of oversharing, though, that's something that I've spent a lot of time with because I'm very open and vulnerable. And in my book, I always tell people when they start reading it or when they purchase it, like, prepare yourself because it starts with a bang. But that was, for me, this was a lot of my process of therapy, of writing out and showing how you can reframe your story. And the first few times that I stood up in front of a crowd of people to tell my story, there were certain parts of my story that I burst into tears. And the first time that happened, I was actually surprised by it because I've done so much work, and
Sure.
It was the first time with a group sharing these pieces of me. And even though I've done it many times, there's still, when I'm really open and authentic about my story, like, it's tough. There's a lot of darkness and sadness in it. And even just watching the way people react as they hear me talk about different things, it can create a lot of emotion. And I've even had, like, my mom once came to one of my workshops a couple years ago, and she pulled me aside after, and she asked me, what do you think about oversharing or being too vulnerable?
Right.
And I had to really sit with that of, I thought I did such a great job. I was so open, but yes, I was crying. And so I've developed a little bit of a template. For me, it's all about, like, once you have structure, it's a lot easier to be versatile and move from it. So it comes back to the chakra system. So if you're going to share something, first step is you need to make sure you feel safe. And that could be the environment you're in, or simply just connecting with your breath and ensuring that you don't have a overactive nervous system right now, that you really are cultivating safety, not only for yourself, but for the people you're sharing with.
Of course.
So you're sharing something, like, real.
Deep.
Right?
Yeah.
You don't want the other person to be like, are you okay? Right? You want to make sure that you're creating safety.
Right.
And then the next step is about connection. And like, feeling a sense of bonding with the person. Have they earned the right to hear your story? Have they showed that they're capable of really being in it with you? And then up top is the solar plexus. So to me, it's about purpose. Am I sharing this to just, like, get it out and to be like, look at me, I have trauma too? Is it to dump it on your lap so that I'm not alone in it? Or am I sharing for a bigger purpose of healing and connecting and showing people they're not alone in their darkness. And to me, you follow those 3 steps, that brings you to the heart. And when I've drawn this out, because I always think back to that movie, A Beautiful Mind.
Right.
That's kind of what my apartment looks like. Posters and
Yeah.
Post-it notes and books and stuff all over this one wall that I've claimed as my corner. And vulnerability is one of the pictures I have up in there that shows the qualities of the root, the sacral, the solar plexus. And then out from there is a stem with a flower with a heart as the middle of it. And that's, to me, that's real emotional vulnerability, is when you're really caring for yourself and others before you open about something that is deep. Yeah.
Right. So you said something very, very cool there. I don't know if cool is the right term, but I've never heard it coined this way or phrased this way. The difference, learning the difference between small T and big T trauma.
Yeah.
Whether you're a child or an adult, I think that's the big, big thing, because we are prone to overreaction sometimes, whether it's just a small little thing that shouldn't really affect us the way that it does, but we blow it out of proportion, right? So how could we start to move towards understanding the difference between small and big T?
Well, little T is happening all the time.
Sure.
So, big T is like, the big stuff,
Right.
and I don't want to go too deep.
No,
you know what
no.
I mean, though, right?
Yeah.
Like it's like you're forever changed because of this one moment or year or relationship or upbringing. Like it's
Right.
something really big, but that doesn't take away from the impact of these small T traumas.
Right.
Those build up as well.
So what I mean to ask, though,
Yeah.
is, and I want to get, some people are going to look at me funny for saying this, but there are a lot of people who will get a parking ticket, and that is a big, big T, and that'll throw them into depression for 2 or 3 days, where you know what, really, in the grand scheme of things, it really is a small T, but that's kind of what I'm talking about.
I see. Yeah. So for that example, it's because it's touching something deeper. I remember this metaphor. I think I learned it in a yoga teacher training. Is that we're all kind of walking around with thorns in our body. And these thorns could be from the big T's or the little T's. And when something happens, someone says something, you have a thought, you see something, it reminds you of something, you hear a song, it takes you back to this place. It's like someone just like flicked or pushed that thorn. So it might appear from the outside, and even to the person experiencing it, like, whoa, I'm freaking out over nothing.
Right.
But it's because it's touched something that's deep. It's a wound, it's a thorn, and it's going to keep being this explosive reaction until you actually go and you meet the thorn.
Right.
And that's how I healed my eating disorder. It's how I continue to heal these different triggers that come up for me on a daily basis, is by seeing it and holding space for it. And instead of feeding it or avoiding it or fighting it, it's actually softening around it. And the process is mindful embodiment of, when you feel it, to actually pause and ask yourself, well, where am I actually feeling that in my body? Is it moving? Does it have a sensation, a frequency, a depth, a texture, a color? To get really, really curious and follow and track sensation through your body, because emotions want to move like a wave. It's energy in motion. And when we get in the way of it by shaming ourselves or being embarrassed or pretending it's not a thing or avoiding it, running off to distract ourselves, we're basically starting the process, and then we're like, no, I'm not going there, and we revert out of it. But that's a lot of energy that's in your body now, and it needs to go somewhere, and so it just gets stuck. And this is really what the mind-body connection is about, is understanding how your body remembers everything. It's like a recording device.
Sure.
So when something happens that has a huge dump of cortisol at the same time, so maybe this person was in the car when their parent got a speeding ticket, and it was the last money they had in their bank account, and then Christmas was ruined that year.
Right.
As a random example. That's a huge deal to a child in that situation, and watching how it impacts the people that they love. And your body, this is one of the survival instincts, is remember that. Don't let that happen again. Do everything you can to avoid situations like that in the future. So then these little things that are happening as adults are just flicking and touching that thorn, and you might have no idea why you're freaking out, but it's because it's touching that deeper wound that needs to be felt and seen and released.
So when you are reacting to a small T as if it were a big T, chances are there is an underlying issue
Definitely.
to be addressed.
Yes.
I feel like I have a million other questions for you. We would love to have you back on the show.
I would love that.
So tell us a little bit about Be the Change.
Yeah. Oh, my baby.
That is your baby.
Yeah. So I got this book published 2 years ago. So I'm 33 now. This book was officially published at 31. It really started as my own writing process, first of all, because I'm a coach as one of my jobs. And one of the things I get people to do is to reframe their story, to really look at, what do you think of your life? How do you talk about your childhood? What do you avoid? What do you embellish? Really dig into it to get clear on where you could change your language or get more focused on what you learned instead of what sucked or comparing or judging, because how you perceive your story is impacting your body. And when you can reframe it, what it does is it becomes the strong foundation beneath your feet instead of the heavy weight on your back. And so through this process of doing this with clients, I decided, well, I need to walk the walk. Everything I do, it's about leading by example. I would never tell someone to really go deep into something that I haven't also experienced myself. And I realized I need to go deeper into this. And so it started as just a writing exercise for me. And through the process of writing it, I just felt called, like this is bigger than a private writing exercise. This is now a book. And I got really excited about it, and knowing about the subconscious mind, needing to break it down into small portions. I committed to 10 minutes a day, and some days 10 minutes felt like 10 hours, and other days 10 minutes opened up into 5 hours of flow. But it was every single day for 10 minutes. And so it was about 8 months of just me writing to get the bulk of the book done. And then I just started sending it off to people. Can you read it? Give me your feedback. So I had a lot of close friends who were a part of the process for me. And then brought in a graphic designer, a couple editors. But basically it's my story. So it's an autobiography / self-help book, because that's really the way that I live my life. Is I share my story very openly, but it's for a purpose, to show people how they can heal themselves as well. I have a history with growing up Mormon, really difficult mental health afflictions from a young age for various reasons that manifested and became a lot worse. Until I had an existential crisis. I developed self-harm tendencies. I was really promiscuous, a lot of alcohol, a lot of drugs. So I'm very open about all of it. And then what I did to reclaim my life and heal these really, really deeply ingrained habits that were taking me down a very dark path. So I'm really grateful that the book is out in the world, and I'm now working on book number 2.
Great.
And I think where my mind's going with it right now is that we'll see what happens. But again, I'm 33 right now, and I'm picturing the next book will come out at 41.
Okay.
And I see it as almost like this is now my legacy. If I can write a book every decade with everything, like just showing my evolution as I continue the work, like I'm just in love with personal development and expansion. And so that's kind of where I'm going with it, because I'm working on it, but there's a lot that still is coming up for me that I really need to dive into, and I don't want to force it, and I don't want to put a deadline onto it. And there's something about a book a decade that feels really spacious.
It feels right.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're sharing your story. It's a great read. Where can they get a hard copy? And I know it's also on audio. Where can they get the audio version?
Yeah, great. So it is mainly in Calgary as a hard copy right now. So it's at the Chapter Chinook. It's at Lole 17th Ave, Cult, Fitness. Where else do I have it? Live, Yoga and Wellness.
Yeah.
So a bunch of the studios that I teach at. And then it's on Amazon. So you can order a copy that way.
Great.
And then I always have copies on me. And then it's also here at the Central Library in Calgary. It's also a PDF through my website, so I have that available. And then it's on Audible.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Okay, so as if you aren't doing enough already, what is next for Marin?
What is next?
Just a couple highlights,
Yeah.
whether that's close or distant.
Okay, so I'm really.
She's just glowing, by the way. Like, she's so excited right now.
I get really excited about this stuff. I'm really into sound healing right now.
Okay.
I have a new friend named Celeste, and she's a sound healer. And I experienced her class for the first time a few months ago. And immediately after, I was like, oh my God, I need to be your friend. And so we met for coffee and started jamming on yoga nidra and sound healing. And I've been watching more and more videos about sound healing and just really, really paying attention to sound in general and the power of the different frequencies that we can emit. So Celeste and I are collaborating in some pretty big ways
cool.
coming up. So our first one will be January 1st. We're going to do a yin yoga nidra and sound healing event at Yoga Nova. And then we're collaborating on some other really big things coming up as well.
Great.
I'm also a part of a wellness retreat company called Evolve.
Coincidentally enough.
Right?
Yeah.
Great name. And we've got some really big retreats coming up for 2020 that I'm really pumped about. So check out Evolve Retreat Co. What else? Yoga Nidra in general is actually it's my love right now. I'm really good at effort. That's never been my issue. It's actually, it has been my issue because I can be really extreme. Yoga Nidra has really taught me conscious stillness and constructive rest. And that, along with myofascial yoga, which is also really gentle, embodied practices.
Yeah.
I'm down so many rabbit holes right now with all that stuff.
Sounds
But
like it.
yeah,
Yeah.
those are the things that I'm really pumped about right now.
It sounds like you're doing so many different things. And one of the things that I wanted to highlight about you is above and beyond all of your accolades, all the things that you've done and will do. Anybody that knows you will just say that Marin is a great person with a giant heart. And I can see that is very, very authentic. So to you, just very, very simply put, when a person is living an evolved life, what does that look like?
To me, it's about embracing change and the growing pains that come along with that, like really honoring the growing pains and the change and the trajectory and the dips and the dives and the evolution is an ongoing process, and it's about loving every piece of it. That's how you can live an evolved life.
I love it.
Yeah.
Even myself, I'm going to have to take a moment to really digest everything that you said. That was a ton of information. Very, very informative. We'd love to have you back
Great.
again.
Yeah, definitely.
So anybody that is looking for you, where can they find you?
Well, I'm all over Calgary in a bunch of different studios. So I teach spin at YYC Cycle and yoga at Live Yoga and Wellness and Yoga Nova. And then I teach the boot camp and the climb classes at Cult. Other than that, I'm a member at Work Nicer, so I'm there a few times a week. And then on social media, I'm Dopamine, and my website is dopamine.com. I have my email out all over the place. I really encourage people to reach out and ask questions or engage in whatever way, because this is what I want to talk about all day long. So anybody that wants more resources or curious to hear more about anything we talked about or anything that came up for them while listening, feel free to reach out. If I'm not the person to connect with, I also love being the mediator and connector. So
Great.
I've got lots of different people in my community that I love sending other people to as well.
Excellent.
Yeah.
And I want to do you a big favor here.
Yeah.
Dopamine, DOPEAME.
Thank you.
It's so intuitive. No, that's fantastic. That was a great chat, great
Awesome.
conversation.
Thank
Learned so
you.
much. Thanks for being on the show.
Yeah, I appreciate
We're going to have
it.
you on again if you don't mind.
Great. Yeah.
Excellent.
Looking forward to it.
Hey guys, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, I'd recommend that you subscribe to our channel at Evolution VN, and you could do so below. Each week, we'll be releasing a new information-packed interview which will simplify your health and fitness and help you maximize your life. So, subscribe below to be notified whenever a new video is released. Until then, live an evolved life.